We're now joined via Zoom by tourism consultant Gillian Saunders. Gillian, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Thanks, Impiwe, and nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Indeed, it is an absolute pleasure having you join us this evening. I mean, this will be welcomed, with so much glee by the tourism sector in particular. So what would it mean for the sector, both for, UK and South Africa as well?
Well, I think for South Africa, it's a phenomenally important thing. The UK is our single biggest overseas market. In normal years, we were getting 430,000 to 450,000 UK tourists coming here. The remittances to South Africa and what they spent here was worth about 20,750 rand per tourist, which meant they were worth 14 billion to our economy in tourism spend. And as you can imagine, that's a lot. This year, in the first 6 months of the year, we saw 10,000 British people who managed to get here, compared to normally 225,000 in the same period in another year. So it was like just over 4% of normal British arrivals. And so they support a huge chunk of our tourism industry. And there's lots of people who have restaurants that serve a lot of the foreign tourists, who run tourism establishments for the foreign tourists. And in a way, it's not just the leisure tourists as well. There's a fantastic amount of familial ties between the UK and South Africa. So visiting friends and relatives both ways been very important. People have been not able to see their friends and family, big occasions, births of grandchildren since March last year, basically. So it will be incredibly special for the tourism industry. Luckily, countries such as Germany, the USA, the Netherlands and France have been opening up slowly over the last few months. They were much more ahead of the game in terms of understanding the status of our pandemic, that we were Delta dominated and not Beta, etc. And those tourists have been coming through. Obviously, people are not traveling as much as before COVID, so we're not seeing the vast numbers or the normal numbers of 2019, but all of these tourists are so valuable to our tourism industry, which is really in many ways on its knees, because of the extent to which the COVID restrictions have stopped the industry from operating. So yes, and in particular, when I talked about the sort of 4.5% that we were down on the first part of the year, we're just in time, we hope, for our season. So for the people, for instance, we have a market from the UK called Swallows. They are people that we see coming here for 3 months usually. They either have their own home here or they rent a home for 3 months, and they come for our summer sun, which is their winter sun. Those people are going to start coming back here because they're very used to this country, they know it, and they'll be flocking in. The friends and relatives will be flocking in, and some of the foreign tourists who are here for their leisure holidays.
I wonder, though, Gillian, if this wouldn't be, a flip-flop or a toing and froing of some sort. Should, say, for argument's sake, South Africa experiences a fourth wave, will this not propel the UK to reimpose, the red list status?
Well, we can't really be, we can't be concrete about that. There's quite a lot of data that shows that we're expecting perhaps a much smaller fourth wave. As fast as we get the vaccines rolled out, we'll also have a smaller fourth wave. And if we look at, previous to this, to be honest, the UK had restrictions against countries that they lifted when there were much higher case rates than we've been almost for the entire part of our third wave. So there was an inconsistency in the way the UK applied their criteria. Also, their criteria were not transparent. They had no particular thresholds. So while we might have had lower case rates nearly since the whole year, most of the year we had lower case rates than quite a lot of countries that were on green or amber, which included a lot of European countries. So really what we're all saying in the world now, in the world of tourism and travel, is that what makes sense is if you've got a vaccinated traveler, fully vaccinated traveler, then it's basically safe for them to travel to or from any country. Because while the UK is already open, internally the UK is open for everybody to move around, the nightclubs are open, there are no restrictions on spacing in stadiums and things like that, is because they trust their vaccines to work against the Delta variant. And they currently have a much higher Delta variant case rate, pretty much the same rate as at the height of our third wave. So if they're internally opening up, it's because they trust the vaccines, and the data is showing that those vaccines mean that people are not going to hospital and they're not dying. And it's becoming more like a flu. It's called what we call an endemic disease that people learn to live with. And really for a UK traveller who comes here, there's no more risk of a Delta variant, even if we are at higher case rates during what we hope, though, will be a small fourth wave, than wandering around in the UK at the moment, where they've actually got very high case rates.
In as much as we will be removed from this red list come Thursday this week, but obviously the UK has imposed certain restrictions or certain requirements for South African travellers to enter the United Kingdom, such as allowing fully vaccinated travellers to enter the United Kingdom. And for those countries which I would say experience a very sluggish vaccination program, and they're still not fully vaccinated, will this not be a dent on the tourism sector in particular?
In terms of the tourists who go to the UK, unfortunately, or whether you like it or not, typically the people who would be the travellers who might travel to the UK are the people who are more likely in all of their source markets, whether it's India or whether it's South Africa, to be already vaccinated. So I would see that people who then perhaps want to go to the UK who are not vaccinated will make sure they get out there and get themselves vaccinated. So I don't think that that's going to impose an issue on people going to the UK at this point. I think if you are fully vaccinated, many countries are doing this. They're saying if you're fully vaccinated, you come in, there's no quarantine, there's no requirements for anything. At the moment, the UK is still requiring a PCR test as well. The USA is also still requiring a PCR test. Some other countries are just requiring you to show that you've got a vaccination certificate. But then what other countries are saying is if you're not vaccinated, then we at least want a PCR test from before you left and a PCR test perhaps 2 days after you arrive. So that is the way of not discriminating. So if people are not vaccinated, they can travel. But largely, they're also now dropping the quarantine for any types of people travelling. The UK is probably not going to. They're going to keep some countries on the red list. And for non-vaccinated arrivals, I think they're going to keep the quarantine, or most likely at least self-quarantine. But we'll have to see what they announce. They've been talking about the different stages of relaxing these rules on travel. And we don't know exactly what's going to come in on the 8th, which is when they say they'll speak to us next. And some of the regulations or changes that they said they would bring in, it's now nearly 2 weeks ago, are actually only coming into effect tomorrow as well.
Yeah, Gillian, I'm actually glad that you mentioned the PCR test, and I suppose it's another issue, especially in the tourism sector. We know that so many people have been complaining, especially travellers, both domestic and international travellers, that it's so laborious, especially the international travellers. And any likelihood, perhaps, that there will be an easing of the regulations when it comes to testing protocols?
We really hope so. We've certainly seen some countries go out there and say, as long as you're fully vaccinated, no PCR test required, no quarantine required. We are suggesting as a tourism industry to our own government that we currently require a PCR test. We need to start saying, well, if you're double vaccinated, perhaps you don't need a PCR test. We need to be able to move to that. That is the progressive stance that some countries are taking. Of course, the other challenge that you've probably heard about in South Africa, or South Africa vis-a-vis the UK, is the validity of our vaccination certificates. So after originally sort of saying, they don't accept our vaccines, when we dig down into that, it's more that they are concerned about our certification of our vaccines. But luckily, the Department of Health has been saying now for a while that we're going to get our digital vaccine certificates. And in fact, the latest that came out last week was that they hope that all being well, and I hope all is being well, that they'll be out this week, if not tomorrow. So that once we've got a barcoded, globally recognized digital vaccine certificate, and we start to recognise those as well for people coming into the country, it's going to ease travel quite a bit.
And we understand that South Africa lost 180 million rand per week as a result of this red list status. So do you get a sense then that the travel industry is ready to come up with more strategies and more policies to sort of recoup that amount of money and to keep afloat in the industry, as it were?
Absolutely. What we're seeing in all the research that's coming out, and also booking trends as countries are lifted from red lists, for instance, is there's a surge of booking. There's a great deal of pent-up demand to travel. The world has been locked down and they have been unable to travel for quite a while. So people are really looking to have those holidays, looking to have those breaks, looking to be able to go see friends and relatives, looking to be able to connect. And if you actually look at what we have as a destination in South Africa, we have exactly the right type of destination, because we're seeing a couple of trends. One is people want outdoors, they want space, they don't want to be on crowded beaches and nightclubs, and that's not our product. We're not a mass tourism destination. You sit on an open vehicle on a game drive with 6 or 7 other people. You can go to wilderness areas. We have beaches and beaches that, with the exception of a couple of days of the year, our beaches are not crowded. So we offer a lovely open space, open air, lovely climate as well, opportunity. The other thing we're seeing is that people are saying, well, now if I'm going to travel and I'm going to spend money and perhaps take some COVID risk going through airports, which is what people sometimes think, I don't necessarily think there is risk. They're saying, I want to do a special holiday. I want to do a bucket list holiday. I want to do a one-in-a-lifetime trip. And they're quite often saying they want to do it with their extended family. So you're seeing multi-generational trips because people haven't seen their family. So we're this amazing destination, really, that has the bucket list excitement to it. Many people want to do an African safari or they want to come to Cape Town. So we believe we're very well positioned. And I know that our destination marketing organizations, both nationally and in our key cities and areas, are already getting that message out. We're here, we're open, we have the protocols, but we also have the wide open spaces. We are not crowded, we are safe, and you can have an experience of a lifetime in South Africa.
Gillian, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for painting a picture for us on how the red list status, would mean for the South African tourism industry. We do appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Impiwe. Thanks very much.
All right, that was Gillian Saunders. She is a tourism consultant, painting us a picture of what the removal from the red list by the United Kingdom would mean for the South African tourism industry.